whether you like the lecture or not and you find them helpful or not. The practicalities, you pick up what they think is important.
Yeah, and what they're highlighting or not highlighting.
Yeah, and they will say, I was absolutely explicit when I lectured. And I used to stand up and say, don't learn chapter 14. It's rubbish. I wrote the book.
It's rubbish.
I wrote the book. But actually, you don't need to know that stuff.
Yeah.
And I sometimes stand on the desk and wave my hands in the air and say, if you don't know the blood
so
supply
help them,
to the brain,
help them remember.
okay? If you don't know the blood supply to the brain, you're dead. Okay. And that's always like that. And so you're learning what the person wants. So that's very important. And I think distance learning maybe is not so helpful in that regard, because you don't have the personal interaction that said, that's what makes the lecturer so excited.
Yeah.
That's what she thinks is important.
Yeah.
So before you start, it's like that. I think the conceptual, the stuff that I used to teach was primarily not terribly conceptual in the sense, there's two things. You've got to understand the stuff.
Yes.
And then you've got to remember what you've understood.
Yes.
Okay. Now, most of the stuff I taught was relatively easy to understand.
Yeah.
That was not normally the problem. The problem was remembering it.
Yeah.
For other subjects like maths, if you don't understand it, for goodness sake, don't memorize things you don't understand.
No, it's not helpful.
If you don't understand it, go and speak to the lecturer. Do something.
Yeah, YouTube something. Yeah.
Whatever.
Ask a mate or...
Yeah. So I think that's really important. You say, do you understand? I really do. You sure you understand? Yes, I do. Okay. Yeah. Now then, maybe once you've understood it, the job is done.
Just to pause there, I mean, it's one thing saying, do I know I understand it? How would you measure whether you understand something? You could think you understand something. And that's something that's been interesting for me, especially when I teach now, is that I think I understand something. And then as I teach it, I understand it better. Yeah. And I'm like, did I actually understand it? Kind of thing. So at what point do you know whether you've understood something? I mean, It's easy saying, okay, after the test. Yeah. You kind of want to know before the test whether you've understood it or whether, so what would be your comment there?
Yeah. I think it's interesting. One of the very best ways of learning is teaching it to somebody else.
Yeah.
But you've got to find a victim to teach it to.
So, I have many victims.
But, if you've got a compliant mom who's happy for you to sit down and for you to explain calculus to her, that's great, okay? But so teaching things is fantastic, and that's why being a lecturer, boy, do you get your head around things.
Sure.
Because you've had to explain it in first principles. You don't just trot out the formula that you've learned at school.
Yeah.
You have to say, why is it like that? So it's very important that is important. I think one of the ways of figuring out whether you understand it is in subjects like maths and physics, you do examples.
Yeah.
With maths, I remember a dreadful textbook that we had in a core maths at school, and it would give you a page and a half of stuff, and the teacher didn't teach us. He said, do chapter 1, and then he went off into the next room. And he said, do chapter 1. And it was a little bit of information and then a whole lot of things that we had to do, a lot of examples. And at the end of it, you know whether you understand it or not by whether or not you can do the examples. Mm. And something we need to talk about as well is repetition's very important in terms of memory.
Yeah.
It really, really is. And doing examples and that sort of thing, very important, particularly in something like maths. You don't know whether you really understand it.
Yeah.
Unless you've had challenger questions coming from 10 directions.
Yeah.
And don't kid yourself and say it's easy. You say, well, it's easy, you can do it quickly.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
But do the examples. And coming to repetition's very, very important. One of the reasons I don't like big textbooks is because I think reading something once is just a total waste of time. I know I can read something once. I spent one Christmas, I had a big book on the bones of the body, and it was a huge authoritative thing. And I'd been teaching for a few years, and I thought, I'm going to master this book, and I will know more about the bones of the human body than anybody I've ever met. So I spent the whole of the Christmas holidays working it. I photocopied it, I coloured in the diagrams, I studied it, and so on. And I came to the first tutorial that I had to lead in the new term. And I realized I didn't learn them all that I did the previous year. And with fun doing the thing there, but it was purely aesthetic. And going through something once.
Yeah.
But go through once, you go through a second time, you go through a third time. And the first time you don't remember much, but you built in subliminal unconscious foundation. The second time through, you're actually getting up and you're going up to about 15%. And the third time, you're now at 55 or 60%. And the fourth time, boy, have you got it.
Yeah.
And the repetition is what sticks in your mind. And
it's interesting you say that. Sorry, I'm interrupting you there. But I remember when I was in first year, when I was studying at Wits, I remember Stephen, who's also been a guest on this podcast, him saying, every night before you go to bed, read over the notes or the content that you went over that day. And I remember being like, and I didn't do it. But thinking now, given what you said, that's actually very insightful in the sense that it's like you learned it, you engaged with it. Before you go to bed, actually just engage with it once more because it's that element of repetition.
Yeah.
You also then will understand, well, hopefully twig certain things. You're like, wait, there's a little bit of sort of a bit opaque for me there. I need to clarify that. You then go to sleep. It doesn't mean that you have to sort it all out, but you have an inkling of what you don't understand before you start engaging with new material the next day. And that was something I wish I had done in first year because I actually think it would have helped me from a time efficiency perspective. Because then when I went to studying, I wasn't then engaging with a whole sort of, couple of weeks worth of work. I would have, kind of built that understanding and competency along the way in a sort of more constructive manner.
Look, I think that interesting you say that. I found in my first year of varsity, which I unfortunately dropped later, I used to get a lift home. And while I was waiting for my lift home, I would sit down and read through the day's lectures. Now, a lecture used to be an hour-long thing for us. There'd be quite a lot of content, but you could read through the notes of a lecture in maybe 5 or 10 minutes, 7 minutes or something. You read through the lecture notes, create something, that sort of thing, but just go through it. And I could go through the 4 or 5 lectures of the day, and I could do it while I was waiting for my ride home. And there's reason to believe that if you studied something and you take a break, it's good when you come back to just revise what you just studied.
Yes, exactly. Because then it's that element of almost like this is where I left off, and let's continue on that vein kind of thing.
And strangely, the repetition, it doesn't take too long, otherwise you do the same.
No, exactly.
But you say, I've spent 45 minutes studying this stuff. Let me just skim through.
Yes.
Skimming through can be very time efficient and very good.
Yeah.
I find a last minute, doing 2-year set of course notes in 2 hours before an exam. You think, what's it worth? It can be worth.
Yeah.
You're skimming through and you're reminding yourself of the names and you're reminding yourself of the concepts and so on.
Yeah.
But that sort of repetition, and one thing that I read about studying said that what you should aim at is you do the study, then you revise it. Then you revise it at the end of the week. Then you revise at the end of the month, you revise the whole lot, and it's yours forever. Okay?
Yeah.
And it's interesting, that repetition thing, the guy in the book had a graph. But what they said was if you know 0 at the beginning of a study period or a lecture, and let's just say at the end of it, 100 units.
Yes.
Okay.
Whatever those units are.
Yeah. And whatever those are. And then with time, it decays. And you will find after a week or so, you may remember almost nothing. But if, having done that, if an hour later you go over it again, the graph comes down, but it doesn't level off at 0. It levels off at maybe 10% or whatever.
So,
and you go for it the third time, it levels off at 40%. Okay. And there's a sense, I think asymptote's the right word, but it kind of levels off.
Yes, it like plateaus.
Yeah, it plateaus.
But at a higher level.
Higher level. And the repetition does that. And once through of something, may plateau at almost 0.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But if you repeat it, then it comes.
Yeah.
If you don't repeat it, and that's why there's the highly detailed set of notes thing. It used to break my heart when I was students who did that. Because they're writing notes until 3 days before the exam.
They actually aren't, they're not,
They've only done the first phase. Only done the first passage through your brain.
Yes.
And as I remember one girl who I told not to do this. But she came to the final exam. She had a huge file, which she just popped on the floor next to her feet as a security thing. And I sort of looked at it, beautifully, grams aside. And she got the regulation 51%. She was a bright, hard-working girl. You should have got 75 or 80.
Sure. I think I'm just looking at the time here. One of the last questions I would ask you is, what would be your advice to someone who is struggling to concentrate? So they're putting in the hours, but, they're spending a vast amount of time or proportion of that time trying to just get themselves to kind of focus, I mean, albeit that can be for different reasons, but what would be your advice to someone who is trying to sort of kickstart their concentration?
A medical thing, I've worked quite a lot in psychiatry too. Medical thing, it's worth sticking in the back of your head if you really struggle to concentrate more than anybody else.
Yeah.
And your mind is like always somewhere else.
Yeah.
And you focus for 5 minutes and then you think about something else. It might just be worth finding out whether you've got ADD.
Yeah.
Okay. That's not insulting. I've got it. I know all about it. And some people with ADD are enormously productive.
Yeah.
But it's good to realize that you've got it. Okay?
Yeah.
And I had a couple of students in oral exams that we would do on one occasion, and completely independently they both said to me, I saw a psychiatrist last week and he put me on. If you did have ADD at school and when you were a kid and so on, don't be a hero, okay?
Yeah.
Be real.
Yeah, yeah.
Because you can kill yourself. People with ADD often underproduce, and you want to cry about it because they can be very, very gifted.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. But leave aside that, for the 95% of us that don't have ADD,
yeah,
I think getting enough sleep is critical.
Yeah.
Okay? And it really is. If you are tired, you can't concentrate.
Yeah. It's like diminishing returns, right? Just go sleep.
and because you don't concentrate well, you work until 3 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, because you're like, I have to get through this. Yeah, exactly.
And you say, go to bed. Go to sleep. Now, if you remember anything from I've said today, go to sleep.
Yeah.
But I need study time. I say sleep is study time.
Mm-hmm.
Go to sleep. And try and be balanced in the way you function.
Mm.
Okay. And don't let your anxiety about whether or not you're going to pass prevent you from sleeping enough and getting whatever exercise inside is what you want.
Yeah.
What you need to do. The other thing is you need to be conscious of the things that are going to distract you.
Yeah, and create an environment that reduces those distractions, right? So don't put your phone face up next to your textbook.
If you want to know where to put your phone, I would say drop it down the toilet. The practicality. I've lectured so many times, seen people on their phones and all the rest of the day. I don't mind. I don't take it personally.
Yeah.
I'm also a human being. But, for the 10 minutes you're on your phone,
you're not absorbing.
Speaking in quiet.
Yeah.
About, don't matter. It's your choice. But be real.
Yeah.
Okay? And you need to work out what's a good environment for you.
Yeah. So like whether that's listening to music or not listening to music or being in a study group or flashcards or etc.
Yeah. And some people have got to be by themselves. I'd lived at home with my mom, who was nearly 60, and my granny was in her late 80s. And I hang a blanket over the door, and I was in my home, and cell phones didn't exist. I would study like a dream.
Yeah.
No distractions. Okay. I couldn't study in a group.
Yeah,
okay.
I also couldn't. It's too distracting. Or in a coffee shop, I can't do that.
Yeah.
Too much study.
There are some people that need noise around them.
Yeah.
They need somebody next to them. They need some people have got to study by discussing things.
Yes.
That's great. You've got to get enough sleep. You've got to be time efficient. You've got to find out what it is they want you to know.
Mm.
I also want to put in a plug for attending whatever classes there are.
They prescribe. Yeah. They're there for a reason.
Yeah. And they're done there and you say, but he's out of it. How's he lecturing? I say, probably he is. But by sitting in there, you hear the way he says the words. Okay.
Yes. So, and that's how he's going to phrase the questions because he's the one setting. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. He or she is the one setting the payment.
That's it. Yeah. And you pick up the emphasis that they've got.
Yeah.
You pick up the way they're thinking. And truth be told,